Today we're telling the story of a woman who changed the course of world history, a woman whose name you probably don't know, but whose legacy you experience every single day if you've ever attended university, earned a degree, or sat in a lecture hall. Her name was Fatima al-Fihri, and in 859 CE, she founded the world's first university. Not just a school, not just a mosque, but a formal degree-granting institution of higher learning that has operated continuously for over 1,165 years. This is the story of how a Muslim woman from Tunisia transformed personal tragedy into one of the most enduring contributions to human civilization. Before we jump in, if you're enjoying these deep dives into Islamic history, do me a huge favor, smash that like button, drop a comment below telling me which Muslim historical figure you want to see next, and subscribe so you never miss these stories. We're building something special here, and I want you to be part of it. Alright, let's get into it. Fatima bint Muhammad al-Fihri al-Qurashiyah was born around 800 CE in Kairouan, Tunisia. This was North Africa during the early Islamic period, a time of incredible intellectual energy and cultural transformation. Her family came from the Fihrid branch of the Quraysh tribe, the same tribe as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. This lineage placed her within an elite stratum of Arab society that valued both ancestry and intellectual achievement. But what made Fatima's upbringing truly exceptional wasn't just her noble lineage, it was her education. In an era when female education was often limited to domestic skills, Fatima's father, Muhammad al-Fihri, made a revolutionary decision. He gave his daughters the same rigorous education he would have given sons. Fatima and her sister Maryam studied Islamic jurisprudence. They mastered hadith, the traditions of the Prophet. They became fluent in the complexities of Arabic language and grammar. This wasn't decorative knowledge. This was practical, legal, administrative literacy, the kind of education that would allow them to manage property, conduct business, and navigate the legal systems of their time. And Fatima would need every bit of that knowledge for what was coming. In the early 9th century, Fatima's family made a life-changing decision. They left Kairouan and migrated to Fez, Morocco. Now Fez wasn't just any city. Under the Idrisid dynasty, it was rapidly becoming the intellectual and commercial heart of North Africa. The city had been founded just decades earlier, and it was booming. What made Fez special was its unique structure. The city was actually two settlements on opposite banks of a river. One side, called Adwa al-Andalus, was settled by refugees from Cordoba in Spain. The other side, called Adwa Al-Qarawiyyin, was settled by immigrants from Kairouan, Fatima's people. These weren't just random migrations, these were transfers of knowledge, culture, and expertise. The Kairouanese brought with them the sophisticated urban traditions of Tunisia, a region famous for Maliki jurisprudence and scholarly excellence. The al-Fihri family prospered in this environment. Muhammad al-Fihri became a successful merchant, trading in gold dust from West Africa, luxury silks, and spices. The family accumulated considerable wealth. But then tragedy struck, and it struck hard. Shortly after her marriage, Fatima suffered a series of devastating losses. Her father died, then her husband, then her brother. In rapid succession, the men in her life were gone. This left Fatima and her sister Maryam as the sole heirs to their father's massive commercial fortune. They were young women, grieving, suddenly wealthy, and facing a choice that would define their legacy. What would they do with this inheritance? They could have lived in luxury. They could have remarried into other wealthy families. They could have secured comfortable, quiet lives. But Fatima had a different vision. She looked around Fez and saw a growing city bursting with students, scholars, and worshippers. The existing mosques were becoming overcrowded. There was no central place where knowledge could be systematically preserved and transmitted. And she made a decision that would echo across centuries. She would use her entire inheritance to build a mosque. Not just any mosque, a mosque that would become a center of learning, a place where knowledge would be accessible to everyone, a place that would serve her community not just for years, but for generations. This was the Islamic concept of Sadaqah Jariyah, ongoing charity. The idea that certain acts of goodness continue to benefit people long after you're gone, and the rewards continue to reach you even after death. On the first day of Ramadan in 859 CE, construction began, and here's where the story becomes almost legendary. Fatima made a spiritual vow. She would fast every single day from the beginning of construction until the project was complete. Think about what that means. Not just the physical labor of overseeing a massive construction project, not just the financial management of allocating resources, not just the administrative challenges of coordinating workers and materials, but doing all of that while fasting every single day. For nearly 2 years, she personally supervised every detail. She insisted that all materials, the stone, the sand, the water, be sourced directly from the construction site itself. Why? To ensure the absolute purity and legitimacy of the foundation. This wasn't just building a structure, this was a spiritual act, an act of devotion as much as architecture. When the Al-Qarawiyyin mosque was completed, it was modest by later standards, about 30 meters long, with 4 transverse aisles and a central courtyard. But what Fatima had created wasn't just a building, it was an institution, and institutions, when properly designed, can outlive empires. Over the centuries, Al-Qarawiyyin grew. Each successive dynasty that ruled Morocco sought to add to it, to expand it, to beautify it. The Umayyads built a taller minaret in 956 CE. The Almoravids in the 12th century expanded the prayer hall to accommodate over 20,000 worshippers. The Marinids in the 13th and 14th centuries built formal residential colleges, madrasas, around the mosque, transforming it into a true university campus. But the real transformation wasn't architectural, it was pedagogical. Al-Qarawiyyin developed a formal system of education, not just informal study circles, but a structured curriculum with standardized instruction and official certification. The method was called the halqa, the circle. Students would sit in a semicircle around a sheikh, a master scholar, who would teach from a specific text. But this wasn't just passive listening. The sheikh would read, provide commentary, and engage students in debate, in dialectical questioning, in critical analysis. Students didn't just memorize, they argued, they challenged, they defended their interpretations. And when a student completed years of rigorous study, sometimes a decade or more, they would receive an Ijazah, a license, a formal certification that they had mastered a subject and were authorized to teach it to others. Does this sound familiar? It should. Modern scholars, especially George Makdisi, have demonstrated that the Ijazah is the direct ancestor of the Western university degree, the license to teach, the licentia docendi, that became the foundation of Oxford, Cambridge, Bologna and Paris. It came from this, from Al-Qarawiyyin. But Al-Qarawiyyin wasn't just teaching religious subjects. The curriculum was comprehensive, breathtakingly broad. Yes, there was Quranic exegesis, Islamic theology, and Maliki jurisprudence. These formed the core, but students also studied mathematics, algebra and geometry, astronomy and celestial navigation, medicine, anatomy and pharmacology, history, geography and music theory, even philosophy. The works of Aristotle and Plato, preserved and commented upon by Muslim scholars, were taught here when Europe had largely lost access to these texts. Al-Qarawiyyin became what one scholar called a bridge of scientific glory, transmitting the wisdom of the ancient world, combined with Islamic innovations, back to a Europe that desperately needed it. And the students who came through these halls, their names read like a who's who of medieval intellectual achievement. Ibn Khaldun, the 14th century scholar whose Muqaddimah is considered the foundation of modern sociology. He developed theories about the rise and fall of civilizations, about social cohesion, about economic cycles, concepts that wouldn't appear in European thought for centuries. He studied at Al-Qarawiyyin, Al-Idrisi, the master cartographer who created the Tabula Rogeriana, the most accurate world map for over 300 years. His geographical knowledge came from Fez. Ibn Rushd, known in the West as Averroes, his commentaries on Aristotle became the standard text in European universities and shaped the entire scholastic movement. His intellectual circles were connected to Al-Qarawiyyin. But here's what's really remarkable. Al-Qarawiyyin didn't just educate Muslims. Maimonides, the great Jewish philosopher and physician, studied medicine and philosophy in Fez. His masterwork, The Guide for the Perplexed, remains central to Jewish thought to this day. Pope Sylvester II, before he became Pope, traveled to the Islamic world and learned from scholars connected to Fez and Al-Andalus. He introduced Arabic numerals, the concept of zero, and the abacus to Europe. Think about that. The mathematical system we use today came to Europe through this network of Islamic scholarship. This was interreligious intellectual exchange at a time when most of the world was deeply divided along religious lines. And the institution that made it possible, it was founded by a woman. But Al-Qarawiyyin's influence goes even deeper than individual scholars. It influenced the very structure of the Western university. George Makdisi's research has shown that European universities borrowed extensively from the Islamic Madrasa model. The endowment system, the way universities hold property and funds in perpetuity for educational purposes, that's the Islamic Waqf system that Fatima herself used. The professorial chair. The term comes from the Arabic kursi, the elevated seat where Islamic scholars sat while teaching. Academic regalia, those graduation gowns and square mortarboard caps, they're believed to originate from the dress of Islamic scholars. The doctoral defense, the requirement to publicly argue your thesis before a panel of experts, that comes from the Ijazah examination process. Even the term fellow for an academic colleague is thought to derive from the Arabic sahab, companion or student. The DNA of every university in the world, from Harvard to Oxford to Tokyo University, can be traced back to the model pioneered at Al-Qarawiyyin. And at the heart of Al-Qarawiyyin was its library, established by Fatima herself and massively expanded over the centuries. Today, the Al-Qarawiyyin library houses over 4,000 manuscripts. Many of them are unique, the only copies in existence. There's a 9th century Quran written in Kufic script on camel skin, dating to the same century as the university's founding. There's a 14th century copy of Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah, bearing his own handwriting. There's a collection of hadith, the Muwatta of Imam Malik, inscribed on gazelle parchment. And there are Arabic translations of Aristotle, Euclid and Galen, the very texts that sparked the European scientific revolution when they were translated into Latin. But by the early 21st century, this priceless library was in crisis. The drainage system had failed, sewage water was threatening the manuscript vaults, the structure was literally crumbling. And in a beautiful historical parallel, the person who saved it was another woman, Aziza Chaouni, a Canadian-Moroccan architect, a native of Fez. From 2012 to 2016, she led a painstaking restoration. The project discovered a hidden room from the 12th century, with a wooden cupola that had been sealed behind walls for centuries. She modernized the facility with climate control, a state-of-the-art conservation laboratory, and digital security, while preserving its ancient character. In 2018, Time magazine named it one of the world's greatest places. Fatima's legacy, preserved and renewed by another visionary woman. Today, Fatima al-Fihri has become more than a historical figure. She's a symbol. For Islamic feminists, she's proof that Muslim women weren't passive victims in history. They were builders, founders, visionaries. Her story is cited to challenge Western misconceptions about women in Islam. Here was a woman who initiated, planned, funded, and supervised the world's first university, on her own terms, with her own wealth. And her name continues to inspire. The Fatima al-Fihri Open University, founded in 2016, provides low-cost online education to youth in developing countries. The Erasmus Mundus Fatima al-Fihri program facilitates academic exchange between North African and European universities. The Fatima al-Fihri Prize in Tunisia recognizes individuals advancing women's education in the Mediterranean. The University of Alberta offers the Fatima al-Fihri Award supporting female graduate researchers in Islamic studies. Her name is synonymous with education, empowerment, and excellence. Now, I should mention something important. As historians, we have to acknowledge the limitations of our sources. Most of what we know about Fatima comes from a 14th century historian named Ibn Abizar and his work, the Rawd al-Qirtas. That's 5 centuries after her death. A fire destroyed much of the Al-Qarawiyyin archives in 1323, so detailed personal records are lost. Some modern historians have questioned whether the story contains elements of pious legend, the kind of hagiography that gives institutions noble founding narratives. But here's what's undisputable. Al-Qarawiyyin exists. It has operated continuously for over 1,165 years. It was recognized by UNESCO and Guinness World Records as the oldest continuously operating degree-granting university in the world. The institution is real. The impact is real. And in the Islamic tradition, the memory of Fatima al-Fihri, held by generations of students, scholars, and citizens of Fez, is as significant as any archival document. For over a millennium, people have walked through those gates, studied in those halls, and believed they were walking in the footsteps of a woman who transformed grief into greatness. So what can we learn from Fatima al-Fihri's story? First, that education is the most enduring form of charity. Buildings crumble, empires fall. But knowledge compounds across generations. Second, that women can be architects of civilizational progress, not as exceptions, not as anomalies, but as agents of change who shape history. Third, that institutions matter. Fatima didn't just teach students herself, she created a system that would teach millions long after she was gone. And fourth, that a single vision, properly executed, can echo across millennia. Fatima al-Fihri died sometime in the late 9th century. The exact date isn't recorded, but her creation, it thrives. Al-Qarawiyyin was incorporated into Morocco's state university system in 1963. Today it teaches both traditional Islamic sciences and modern subjects like English and information technology. Students still sit in circles around scholars. They still receive ijazahs. They still walk the same courtyards Fatima walked over 11 centuries ago. The woman from Kairouan who lost everything and chose to give everything created something that outlasted kingdoms, survived wars, weathered revolutions, and adapted to modernity. She proved that legacy isn't about how long you live, it's about how long your impact lives after you. And 1,165 years later, Fatima al-Fihri's impact is still growing. If this gave you a new perspective on Islamic history and the role of women in building our civilization, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got so many more incredible Muslim biographies coming your way. Scholars, scientists, revolutionaries, visionaries who change the world but rarely get the recognition they deserve. Drop a comment below. Who do you want to see next? I read every single one. Until next time, this is Muslim Biographies. Remember, history has the answers if you know where to look.